Yes. Describe 10 things, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do.
Did you get me in it?
Yeah, I don't think I'm in a left-handed setting with any personality at all.
Hi, welcome to the gallery. Come on in. It's a beautiful day out, and we're here to look at the work that Susan Calza has done in her sabbatical. I hope that you may listen to Susan as she talks about the work and traveling and process and make yourself comfortable. If you have questions, feel free to ask them either as she's talking or afterwards. And just again, make yourself comfortable. There's no rule about where you've got to stand or sit or whatever. Just make, be well. And I'll turn it over.
Ah, boy, I feel like I don't know what to say, which is kind of unusual, but I did want to say a couple of things. One is all of this work was done with my left hand, and I'm a right-handed person, and I took off my glasses, and these are not cosmetic. I need these things. And I did that for a lot of reasons. I look at art a lot and I travel a lot. I like to, for some reason, I like to kind of shake things up in my life. And I never felt like I could draw the way I wanted to. Nothing ever came out quite right. So I thought, okay, so try the other side, which I did. And I liked the riskiness of it. I liked the vulnerability of it. I also write a lot. I don't know if I'd call it poetry, but all of the pieces, I think, have words in them that maybe are scrubbed in or removed and come back. And I find that when I use my left hand, I write fewer words. I'm less verbose. The words are more important. I'm more awkward. So I like that very much. What else can I tell you? Some of these series were done in specific locations. Most of this wall was done in New York. I spent 2 months. I want to thank Johnson State College for the sabbatical, yes, and some funding, which was fabulous. So I spent a couple of months in Chelsea last year, and I went down on the train during a blizzard, and I brought a small portfolio with me, and I tore pieces of paper, all different kinds, into sheets that were about this big so I could carry them in the portfolio. And then I started doing all of these. But when I wanted to do bigger pieces, I found I had to tape them together. And I was using wet on wet Sumi ink. So I would put different kinds of paper together. And I loved it because each wet piece of paper would receive the ink differently. So there's another wild card in there, harder to control. So that was kind of a fun series. These came out, these two pieces. New York is full of junk and stuff on the streets, and I love it. I love New York. I love cities. I love that kind of crush of humanity that makes you really exhausted and gives you a headache. But it makes me feel really alive. So I was living close to the fashion district, and one of my favorite stores was the bookstore for the Fashion Institute of Technology. So I'd go there and I'd buy stuff, and then I'd walk around and go through the dumpsters and pull out junk and garbage and plastic. New York is full of good stuff, and it's all free. This piece actually, this one came, I helped at the College Art Association conference last year. I went and helped Kathy Black work at the Vermont Studio Center table to kind of promote the graduate program here. And I got there early one morning, and I was astounded at the stuff they were throwing away. People were setting up booths, so there was all this stuff. So I just kind of bound it and wrapped it up. And the guy was walking by, and he said, "It looks done to me." So I got in a cab, and I thought, it's not quite done. So anyway, I put a drawing on it, and I made it a little, I think you would call this a shrub in the dancing world. And so I did these guys. Let's see, I was in Nepal for a couple of months. Kathmandu, we started out in India. I've not been to India, not been to the Far East or subcontinent. And it just blows you right out of the water, those of you who have traveled there. It's just reduces you down to the most essential form of humanity. You feel everything. And if you're lucky, you don't shut out those feelings. So I ended up flying in from New Delhi with my husband Mark into Kathmandu. There's one airport to get into Nepal. And as we were circling around, I saw these incredible smokestacks, these brick things that were amazing in these brickyards. And I'm thinking, I'm staying here for longer. So we're going through passport control, and I said to him, "Hey, I think I'm going to stay here for a couple of months." And he said, "Oh boy," you know. So I ended up staying in Kathmandu for about 2 months. I had met a woman in New York who was selling paper, and her brother lived in Kathmandu, and she said, "You must meet my brother." And then I became family. So I did a bunch of work in Kathmandu. The red drawing and those two on top. The blue one I never liked, but I'm going to give it to my granddaughter when she happens to come about. My son's not even married yet. Layla liked it. I just want to say something. I want to thank Jacob Genter for sharing his mother, who has a magnificent eye and is great with a hammer. Layla was great. We jumped all this stuff in here on Sunday, and it was like, and she just took over. So that was pretty great. What else can I tell you? The last New York pieces I did were these two, or no, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's one over there too. And I did these in October. And they came out of the same place that the small pink photos did over there. And that's the title of the show, called Much Acquainted Missing. I was burned out. I love traveling. I love being in cities. But I missed home, I missed my family, I missed what was familiar. And I found myself in New York in October and just wanted to get home. There was a snowstorm, I was stuck. It was a Monday. Where do you go on Monday in New York? So I sat on a bench at the Museum of Modern Art, right around the corner from an elevator. And there was a not very interesting light sculpture in that corner that glowed pink. And I was kind of bored, but as people walked around to go to the elevator, they all looked up. And so I sat there with my camera. And I was feeling miserable. I was feeling lonely and like I wanted to be home. But I ended up going around the museum and taking photographs. And wrote in my book, Much Acquainted Missing. And that's where that series came from. And from those, you see there's a piece there with arms and jewelry. It's called Occupy. That is, I think that comes from the net. I think that I ripped that off from an On painting. And next to that is a young woman I met at Occupy Wall Street. I helped out one day down there, and she had a rat living in her hood. So I put those two together. That series, those little ones are just moments, quick little moments. What else can I tell you? I got some good feedback the other day, and it was Bethany, I think her last name was Plessy, came down through, and we're standing here, and I looked at her, and I put these up, and I thought, you know, it looks kind of light. And she said, yeah, considering all the pissed off energy there, you know, it's kind of edgy. There's a lot of edgy stuff going on. Let's see, what else? I don't know what else to, oh, I know what else I wanted to say. In a span of 2 months, we lost three of our old animals in our house, 2 cats and a dog. So there are images around about that and about losing, you know, my Rosa was with me for 15 years, so that was pretty tough. And I think about, because I was traveling in Nepal and India and then Istanbul, which I had been to 20 years before, these are ancient places. You are surrounded by history. You're surrounded by death. Look around, 100 years, we're not going to be in this room. And so when you go to these ancient places and you're walking through roads that are rubble and new civilizations that are popping up and overpopulated, it's like, not only, it's like, yeah, impermanence, but I call it loss. Because, you know, you feel it. We call it impermanence, but, so there's a lot of loss in this room. But there's a huge amount of joy and playfulness. The gold, somebody asked about the gold. It's pure, it's 23 karat, you can't reduce it. I like that. It's also a ridiculous substance. We pay all kinds of money for something you can't eat, right? The monetary system used to be based on it. I'm not sure what it's based on anymore. You know, I mean, it should be water, you know, but it's gold, but I love it. What else can I tell you? How about you guys ask questions? Yes?
You haven't said anything about the sculpture.
Oh, the sculpture. Huh. All right, the sculpture. What can I tell you about the sculpture? Well, what kind of story do you want to hear? I'll tell you a good story and a happy story and a not so happy story. Okay. Let's see. This one's just plain old goofy, and I liked it. I get obsessive. This is about being obsessive. I finger crocheted on the porch forever and ever and ever and ever. And I wrapped saran wrap, and this was supposed to be a ball, but it ended up not being. But you know, and I just, in the end, I thought, I can't quite dismiss it. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure, but I still like it. It still talks to me. This piece, I almost didn't make it in the show, but I thought, my son Gabriel, and that's a portrait of him right there. There's a picture of me and Gabe underneath that big one. When I saw him in Istanbul, he's 20 right now. He's taken a gap year, and right now he's in Cambodia, I think. So these are cushions he used to sleep on as a kid. We didn't have a spare room, so when his friends would come over and stay, they'd sleep on the cushions. And then years later, his friends said, no, we want the cushions. So I had them, I was going to bring them to Goodwill, and I thought, let me just try doing something. So I sort of like it. I'm not so sure, but it's kind of friendly. This one's a little heavier, but some of you have heard this story, and honestly, it was an incredible moment for me in my life. But I had just I was asked to go to Gampo Abbey on Cape Breton in Nova Scotia to Gold Leaf Agao, which is part of a stupa. It was the worst 2 weeks of my life. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm working with gold leaf and all this kind of stuff. I'm trying to meditate, you know, it's just, so I came off of that and I went to see my husband and my sister on Prince Edward Island, and I finally got to the beach and we're like chilling on this gorgeous 17-mile beach, and Mark is sitting next to me and goes, "What's that in the water?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to know what that is. I hope that's a dead seal." Well, it wasn't. Someone had drowned. Someone had drowned. So we're sitting on the beach, and because I had just come off this 2-week meditation thing and was pretty focused, I just kind of went into the water. What are you going to do, right? So went into the water. My sister lost it in one direction. Mr. Mark lost it in another direction. So I found myself alone, walking into the water to retrieve this drowned person. And it was one of those moments where time stops, and you experience every single moment. So, and I had all those thoughts you can possibly imagine, but I knew I had to do this. And so I pulled this man, whose name was Eugene, to shore, and we covered him and called the Mounties, and the three of us sat together for those maybe an hour. Felt like an eternity, but I never took my hands off him. I just couldn't. You know, it was like he came to us. So when I came home and I was cleaning up around the house, I found myself making this. And writing the words are about pulling him to shore. And I made this kind of net structure, and for me it was just how that ineffable, how we try to connect with each other, how we try to help each other, even when we don't know each other. I felt like I knew this man. What else can I tell you? I don't know, these two I call the orphans. It's hard for me. I could be on that show Hoarders, you know? It's hard for me to throw stuff away. So I was ripping out a fence out of the backyard. My two dogs, the fence never worked. Have you ever done that? Put up a fence for your rotten dogs and it never works. And it's like $600 later and they're always escaping. So I ripped this out with a vengeance, and I've got this fencing. What do you do with it? So I rolled it up and stuck it in the garage, and I just found myself, you are putting what on fencing? You know, so then at some point you learn to laugh at yourself and your compulsiveness. And I had so many of these portraits. They all started out, I think, probably as self-portraits, but at a certain point they stop being that and they become every person you meet on the subway, every person you meet on the street, every person you meet someplace and you misjudge them, and you think they are a certain kind of person and they're not. I'll just tell you one more quick story about that kind of thing, and I love it. You guys have been to Vanessa's in New York. Some of you know Vanessa's, this great dumpling house, and for like $1 you can feed a family of 12. So I'm standing at the counter, and it's a tiny place, and there's this crush of people, and it doesn't smell good, right? And I'm standing next to this kid who's really clearly strung out on drugs, you know, it smells like he's been on the street, and I'm thinking like, oh, I want to be, you know, and it's one of those tough moments. And then there's this businessman behind us who's like pushing and everything, and before you know it, me and this kid are like right next to each other, and I'm still feeling kind of revulsion, and then 7 minutes later, we're the best buddies. And we finally get served, and he goes like this to me. You know, and it's like, I am so glad when I have those moments of being humbled and being totally wrong about people. So, yeah. I don't know, I could ramble on, but ask questions, I guess. Oh, come on. Help me out here.
I'd rather you ramble on.
I could ramble. All right, let me ramble about. This is a fun piece. This was when I was missing. Here, you can pass that around. It's crocheted. It's about 3 or 4 pounds. And I was taking the train. I was in New York for a couple of weeks, and I found myself missing Mark. Never, you know. So it was after Valentine's Day, and I decided to take the train back to Vermont for about 2 days. And I bought some wool and started crocheting. And that's what I ended up coming up with, was just something kind of soft. Soap is, for me, soap comes up a lot. It's one of those, when I was working at Occupy Wall Street, I worked in the comfort station, and all these people, well-heeled people with like fancy clothes would come and bring down quilts and blankets and sleeping bags. It was really pretty cool. And somebody brought a big thing of soap, and one of the kids who was camping there said, "Oh yeah, some globetrotter, right? They were all sample soaps." And then shortly after that, I saw this really small video. I saw a lot of stuff in New York, but this was something I remembered, and it showed a spigot. It was in India, and it showed a spigot of water, and someone took a bar of soap and drilled a hole through it and put a piece of string through it and tied it onto the spigot. And then there was just a little blurb that if you wash your hands, 10,000 babies a year won't die. You know, just so, that's why I put the gold leaf on the soap. What else? These are, if you pay me, I'll tell you my favorite thrift store. And these are all Harris tweed jackets that on the open market that are about $500 or $600, and I get them at this place for about $2.50, and none of them fit, right? So I have all these jackets. But I go through the pockets and find all these cool things, some ancient, some pretty contemporary. What else? This piece, for those of you who were at Laraway last semester, this was the piece, that very aggressive wire piece that was on the wall. And I got this from John Miller, this mattress cover. Remember that day? It was at the Crown. And so John
We're supposed to say that today.
Right. Oh yeah, not the mattress cover day. But anyway, so John is like cleaning out stuff and goes, hey, can you use this? So that's what that is. I've been trying to work with words, and I was talking with Layla about this. There's a drawing here, the one on top. I would love it if I could make that sculpture out of words. This one here, and the words, I haven't read it in a long time, but Martha Nell said, well, the words are really nasty at the top, and then they get really nice at the bottom. So I would love to just make words and stack them. And I Googled wired words, you know, and these are a couple of swear words stuck together. I don't know if I can say that here. But I Googled wire words, and they were all like, breathe and relax, and all. You know, it's like, how about it just, you know, say what you think. What else? These were cutoffs. You know, as I said, I'm kind of a hoarder. My friend Sue Bettman gave me, she said, you want some paper? And she gave, these are end rolls of paper. They were cutoffs. And so I took them home and just kind of mucked around with them. Those images, the small dresses, there are like 1, 2, 3, or 4. Those are probably the oldest pieces here. Those might be 2 winters ago, and they were doll dresses that I stitched between layers of translucent paper and put in the window and photographed. What else? And then that would be the last series, I think. I've done some more drawings since those, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4 with the green, and that is, that red shoe is fish leather that Ken Leslie gave me from Iceland, so we used a little bit of that.
Susan, as you're talking, I'm wondering if this sounds accurate. When you're making a sculpture, are you following a sculpture till it becomes a story? You know, how does the process evolve, like a little bit? Just, you know, you've got something that is telling a piece of the story, and then...
Yeah, probably. That's a good question.
It seems like seeking, and the materials are a way to kind of get at this thing that you couldn't say otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to, yeah, that's pretty accurate. I would have to say that art has always been my first language since I was tiny. I think it was the only thing I understood. Believe it or not, I used to be profoundly quiet. I never talked as a kid. I was silent. I was the youngest of 4. And so I had everything that was going on in my head, and welcome to the inside of my head in this room. And, yeah, right. And so the touch, texture, not so much color for me, but the texture, light is really important. So it's a language. If I touch something, I can know it. If I smell something, I can know it. If I wrap something, I can know it. So it's a way of knowing. It's a way of, and I'm looking at Harlan, I think that's the way you work too. If you build it, I think you'll know it. think a lot of sculptors, and for me with the drawing, that began to happen, and I was really happy about that, kind of getting lost enough so that I could stumble through enough. And then at some point, when you hit the wall, and all of you know this, when you hit the wall and you're completely frustrated, completely, just hang in there and the art's just on the other side. When you get to the point where you think you wanted to get and you're completely uninterested, then the breakthrough is just on the other side of that, because you give it all up then. So with the sculpture, I don't know, it's a more, I don't know if it's more anything, it's a different connection. It always has been. And with language, I'm going to a poetry workshop in May, or June, with 3 artists or poets that I've been reading for years. And I'm really happy about that because words have always been important, though I don't consider myself a poet. Though I would rather be, because I wouldn't have all this stuff. All right, anything else?
Can you talk about the mirror?
The mirror. Yes, there are actually 2 mirrors. There's another one. Hold on, I'll show you the other one. Can you hold that for me? The other one is right here, this little guy. I used to, well, as I said, I would say 97% of these were done in front of a mirror or looking at my hand. What else do you have? You have your face. Because I was doing these with my left hand, I was looking at my right hand and drawing it. Hands are really hard, of course. But, you know, your relationship with the mirror, the one in my office is lovely. It makes me very thin. But I remember, you know, being an angstful adolescent and young adult and feeling like, God, and then just driving and looking in the rearview mirror and think, but you look sane. You know, like, what is this? And so I spend a lot of time looking to understand how one eye is related to another or not, that kind of thing. And then before you know it, I just started wrapping them because I was thinking about all the problems we have because of that, because we're so connected with what we project, you know, what we think we are. Let's hope we break that all down. So I started wrapping mirrors. The other, so influences, so when I was looking at this room, I was thinking, probably a real kickoff for the drawing in this room was going up to the Frick to see a tiny little Goya show. And when I walked in and saw those tiny little drawings, it said, the eyes are askew, yes, I can do this. You know, it was kind of a thing. And then, of course, Louise Bourgeois has always been a huge influence. Eva Hess and Richard Tuttle, for those of you. Every time I see a Richard Tuttle piece, I'm always kind of blown away. I still think he's really, really pretty good. And, I don't know, anything else? Yes?
When I first walked in here a couple days ago, first of all, I stopped and I just kind of stared because there's a lot of stuff to look at in here. And then I got closer to it, and I was really excited to see this show because I've had lots of classes with you, and now I finally get to see your work instead of you looking at mine. And I was sort of, I had that moment of, you know, should I be looking at this? Should I be learning this about this person? And because there's such a feeling, it's so personal in here. It's very personal. It's very much you. And I'm wondering, you have a lot more experience in this than I do. I would be terrified showing something like this to anyone who could just walk in here. Was there anything like that for you, or was it just, you know, come in, I'm an open book, take a look, let's just see what you get?
I'm 40 years older than you are. So at this point, you know, this is, I hope that with my life and my work, I become just the person I am. So, do I want you to like it? Yes. Do I want you to like me? Yes, I'm human. But this is what I do, and I can't, I would be betraying who I was if I did anything else.
This same thing came up in a class with some students that I was in here without Susan earlier today. And we talked about it a little bit, and at least I ended up feeling that it wasn't that I'm getting any big secrets about Susan in looking at this. What I'm getting is this incredible sense that Susan knows Susan. And the connection of the self to the self is what's so inspiring to me about the work. Yeah, that thirst to know yourself, no matter how bad the story or unsure the story is or whatever. So it seems to be really very much about that, without me really knowing anything and clue about her at all. So yeah, I'm not saying it isn't brave, but it's personal in a understanding that she's a person.
There's a Buddhist teacher who came to the U.S. many years ago. He's been dead for a while, Trungpa Trungpa, and he was a very controversial figure. He is the person who brought the Dalai Lama to the U.S. and he's responsible for the Shambhala tradition. And the guy was very controversial, but he said a lot of really good things. And one thing he said was, when you can hold the gloriousness and the wretchedness of life in your hands together, then you can make a perfect cup of tea. And I like that. I like, because it's a piece of work, right? We're living it every day, we're working it, we're pumping, we're not. So I really mean that about seeing myself. I get on the subway, you never know what you're going to find. Your heart breaks, or you're full of joy, and sometimes those things are right next to each other. Okay, I'm good with it, this is my experience. But I also, maybe I'm arrogant enough to believe that I share that with everybody. I hope I do. I hope I do. I mean, I find a lot of solace knowing that other people feel these things too. But I am 40 years old today.
Susan, for some reason, this is reminding me of one small moment I had with you in Paris, of all places. We were at the Louvre together. That sounds like Louvre, but anyway. We were looking at the Persian gallery, and they had these 50-foot tall capitals inside the Louvre. And you couldn't see what was on top of it, really. And I have a picture of Susan going like this, looking up at the Capitol, and as I look at these little miniature columns, you can see the Capitol, you can see what's important, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, who's going to look at that? Who can see it? Who can access that? So I like the accessibility of the concept.
I've referenced Diane Arbus here, and when I was a kid, same kind of thing. Like, I remember being with my mother at a doctor's office, and it must have been a Life magazine or something. I was born in 1953, so what? I'm like 8 years old. And we go into a doctor's office, and all I remember is this magazine was open, and I saw Diane Arbus's work, and I thought, oh my God, there's something there. It's the same kind of thing. And art, I was an art history undergrad major. I could not make art in school. I didn't finish my final design project and failed the course. It was too personal. Making art for me was just like, what are you kidding? What did they say, open a vein and bleed or something? So I studied art history, which is incredible. I still love it. And I'm still blown away. You go to the Met. I go to the Met on Tuesdays all day or something. I'm slow in museums too. It's my first first language, I guess. Anything else? Okay. Anyway, thank you all, and please do go up and see the piece up at the BAC, but also check out our new BAC. It's pretty cool. All right.